Hi everyone, and welcome to a little bit of a transfer special episode of On The Whistle, I guess. First and foremost, I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who came down to the Bridge Hotel Vaults last week for the first ever live episode of On The Whistle. Big thanks to Nick Barnes for joining me as well. Had a really good night. So good to see so many of you down there and really motivated to do some more. So watch this space. We'll hopefully have some more announcements in the coming months about some more live shows. Still available back on the channel. If you want to scroll back, if you haven't yet seen it, there's a lot of kind of extended highlights of the night are on there, so you can go back and have a watch. So yeah, I've been doing a lot of research over the last couple of days into Sunderland's two potential new signings, Habib Diarra from RC Strasbourg and Reinildo from Atletico Madrid. Now, I'm recording this on Tuesday lunchtime. As of yet, neither player has been announced. That may have changed by the time you watch this. In fact, I suspect it probably has changed. But you know, from my understanding, sitting in here on Tuesday lunchtime, both very close to being confirmed as Sunderland players. So I've been watching a lot of these guys' clips on Y-Scout, done a lot of analysis on their kind of statistics from brilliant stat site FBref, which I'd recommend to anybody. So I thought I'd bring you up to speed a little bit about kind of what I've learned about these players, why I think it's clear that Sunderland want to sign them, and also sort of where we can expect them to fit in next season. So I'll start with Habib Diarra. So Habib Diarra is 21. He's a Senegal international. For me, this guy is the perfect summation, if you like, of what Sunderland are trying to do in the transfer market this summer, because they don't want to fundamentally change their strategy. They don't want to make bad decisions on players, i.e. spending a lot of money on players with limited resale value, giving them big contracts that you might struggle to get rid of, and that can cause you huge financial issues in the future, especially if you do suffer a relegation. So what they want to do is they want to invest in young talent still, but they want to invest in players with top level experience, because I think there's an understanding that you cannot just go into the Premier League with players who haven't got experience of what the intensity, physicality, pace and technical quality of top tier football in Europe is like. So Diarra is 21, still got a lot of development to do, clearly has, you know, significant future resale value, but he's a player with quite a bit of top tier experience, full international. Has over 100 appearances, senior appearances now for Strasbourg, despite his age. And so he's somebody who I think the club will feel has a decent chance of coming in and hitting the ground running at Premier League level. Now, in terms of why Sunderland want to sign him specifically as a player, I think from my research, the one thing that screams out to me is versatility. So we know that Sunderland like, if you like, hybrid midfielders, players who can play in a variety of different roles, whether it's as a 10, whether it's an 8, whether it's a 6. They like midfielders who are hybrid. They like versatile players generally, because what allows them to do is, as we've seen in recent years, it allows them to run slightly smaller squads. And one of the reasons why Sunderland think they've got a really unique, a really good team spirit is because all the players are highly motivated, because they think they've got a good chance of getting in the team. So versatility is a big thing, and Diarra, you know, that is the first word that you use about him. So Strasbourg last season played primarily with a 3-4. Let me get my maths right here. A 3-4-2-1 system. Yeah, that's right. So basically, what you kind of call as a box midfield, kind of two sort of holding midfielders, if you like, and two more traditional number 10s. Diarra played in basically all of those positions at some point last season. He played as a 10 off the right, a 10 off the left. He played as a slightly deeper midfielder on the right, a slightly deeper midfielder off the left. At times within games, he played in even more attacking roles than that. One occasion last season, I note that he actually played as on the right of a back three. And earlier in his career, he's also played at right back. So I think that tells you that he's got a really broad skill set in terms of his attributes. He's a little bit of an all-rounder in terms of he can do the defensive side of the game, he can contribute in the attacking third, and he also will bring a lot of versatility to Sunderland. And as I think as they go into the new season, I think that's something that they really value. Watching his clips a little bit closer, I think it's obvious to me what he seems to prefer, and that is, I think if we were to kind of put it into the to give you a sort of visual picture of what it looks like on the pitch, probably the areas that we would most associate that Chris Rigg played in last season as the sort of number 8 on the right of the midfield three. So one of the things that Diarra is exceptionally good at is sort of making things happen, combining with a fullback, combining with or the wing back in Strasbourg's case. You know, his heat map shows he's a player who likes to move out to the right wing. A lot of his statistics kind of reflect the fact that he's operating in those sort of spaces. ranked very, very highly in the French division for crosses into the opposition penalty last season, carrying the ball into the area. Wyscout ranked him as the 8th best centre midfielder in the French top tier last season, and looking at the reasons why they kind of did that, the areas where he excelled against other midfielders in the division: assists, key passes completed, accurate forward passes completed. So you begin to see that the strength of his game is sort of in the really dynamic stuff that he does moving forward. So a few stats that I noted down here from FB Ref when I was doing my research. So for progressive carries, so a kind of dribbling, if you like, carrying the ball forward with ball at feet, he was in the top 12% in the division. His expected assists per 90 for Strasbourg last season, so that's basically how many assists he would be expected to make, judged on the quality of chances he's creating for his teammates. Again, in the top 12% for that. Progressive passes received, so that's essentially where he's receiving the ball in the advanced area of the pitch. He's in the top 8% of central midfielders last season. And carries into the opposition penalty box, he was also in the top 8% of central midfielders last season. So clearly, you know, it goes to show you a player who likes to carry the ball forward. I think he could be perfect for Sunderland's sort of transitional style. Really going to be a threat on the counter-attack, likes to drive forward with the ball at feet, make things happen. And as I said, really, really good at combining with players in those wide areas, which is why he produced more assists than most centre midfielders normally would. And also why he's putting a lot of crosses into the box, why he's getting a lot of passes into the box, because he's operating in those areas. So looking at the way Sunderland sort of operated last season, I would expect him probably to fit in as one of those two 8s, or a slightly more attacking centre midfielder in a 4-2-3-1. But I think it's clear from my research that you can expect him to pop up in a variety of different positions, both from the start and within games next season. Now I think those kind of statistics as well give you an indication of why Sunderland is so keen to sign him, because he's ranking incredibly favourably on a lot of statistics against centre midfielders at the level, despite the fact that he's still so young and has clearly still got so much development to do. I'm thinking some of the sort of more intangible stuff, if you like, as well. As I said, that experience that he has of top level football is really important, but he's also the captain in Strasbourg, so I think that tells you there's a mentality and a level of maturity there as well that probably belies his age. That's something we associate with a lot of the players in the Sunderland squad who are young but have a lot of experience and are very mature as a result of being through a lot of ups and downs in their careers. So I think he's a really neat fit on that. And as I say, that versatility and the age means that mitigates against some of the risk of spending such a big transfer fee, because I think even in a scenario where it doesn't quite come off, there's still a player there who clubs would be interested in taking on. So I think that gives you a little bit of a feel for why Sunderland is so keen on Diarra. I have to say it's a sign I'm really excited about. Hopefully I've given you a little bit of an insight to him as a player there. I don't quite, from what I've sort of, the research I've done, I don't quite see him as a direct replacement for Jude Bellingham, because I think probably from, certainly statistically and from what I've watched, Bellingham looks probably a bit better in the defensive aspect of his game at the moment. Now, there's nothing to say moving forward that if Diarra gets more experience in sort of deeper positions and with Sunderland's training and what have you, that he won't develop those sides of his games. But I think where there's a clear similarity with Bellingham, which is how good he is at driving forward with the ball, turning away from pressure, making things happen on the counter-attack, I think it's clear that Diarra shares a lot of similarities with Bellingham on that front. But I think they are slightly different players. I think they're both box-to-box midfielders, probably at best. But they have a slightly different style from what I've seen so far. And so I wouldn't be surprised if Sunderland were still potentially considering going out and getting another midfielder, maybe with a more of a defensive mindset first and foremost going into the new season. Of course, time will tell on that. So let's have a little chat about Reinildo as well. So this is a really interesting one, because I think this shows the kind of pragmatism. We saw a little bit of it at Championship level last summer, and we're definitely going to see it this summer at Premier League level, where Sunderland, you know, they're clearly going to invest their transfer fees and the bulk of their budget on younger players who have that development, who have that resale value, but they also want to add some experience and some depth to their squad. And I think Reinildo at 31, a player with vast top tier experience, both in La Liga, in the French top division, in the Portuguese top division. He's played Champions League football as recently as March for Atletico against Real Madrid. So I think he's just a bit of a pragmatic addition, a real no-brainer in terms of someone who has an innate understanding of what it takes to succeed at the top level and who's going to bring that mentality to Sunderland. and also offers a little bit of experience. In terms of his playing style, looking at his stats, watching his clips, the first thing to say is he is rapid. He had a major ACL injury about 18 months ago, but it doesn't seem to have impacted his pace. He seems to have been able to come back from that. And so both offensively and defensively, that's obviously a big asset he'll bring. I think it's clear that we're talking about a fullback who loves to defend. So Reinildo is a left back first and foremost. I think it's clear he prioritises that kind of game. Does bring a little bit of versatility. He has played centre back quite a lot in his career, which I think is interesting. So even now for Mozambique, he quite often plays as a centre back. Season before last, when he came back from his ACL halfway through the season roughly, Atletico had started playing with a back three. And Reinildo played most of his football for the rest of that season on the left of the back three. So I think that tells you he's got a little bit of versatility, a little bit of experience that Sunderland and Lebrice can lean on at different stages of the season, but also reinforces that idea that he's a defender first and foremost. And I think it was really interesting that, you know, there was a lot of sort of goodwill and a lot of good wishes from the Atletico support when his departure was announced yesterday. It's clear that he built a good rapport because he was such a wholehearted player and such a strong defender. And so hopefully he'll be a bit of a hit with the Sunderland crowd. So again, just digging into a little bit of his statistics. Last season, to be honest, statistically wasn't the best for him. As I say, whether that was partially because of sort of coming back from injury, didn't play a huge amount of sort of regular football. So hopefully with a strong pre-season under his belt, he can sort of get right back to his best. But the areas where statistically he's sort of standing out are tackles and interceptions. In terms of his on-ball statistics, he has a very, very, very high pass completion rate, but doesn't rank as highly for things like progressive passes, passes into the final third, progressive carries, so essentially dribbling out with the ball. Again, I think that tells you that he can be trusted not to make many mistakes in possession, but he's not someone who takes a huge amount of risks. So not a fullback who's always sort of taking chances on the ball. He looks like he's someone who can keep it fairly simple, but defensively will rank really, really strongly. So if we go back to last season, when he came back from that ACL injury, in terms of the number of tackles he was making per game for Atletico Madrid, he was in the top 1% of centre-backs in La Liga for that. As I say, he was playing centre-back at the time. And in terms of his interceptions, he was in the top 2% of centre-backs in La Liga. So this is someone who tells you that he's excelling at the sort of defensive basics, if you like, and that is his real bread and butter. Thought it would be interesting because the one thing that did jump out to me was, okay, is that because he's playing for a team that really values defensive work, where maybe they're not asking their fullbacks to do a huge amount of attacking work? I think anyone who's watched Diego Simeone's team over the recent years knows how much they value their sort of defensive shape. To be honest, it's not really the case. When I went back to look at the 2021 season, which is when Reinildo won the French top tier with Lille, a very, very similar picture, to be honest, in terms of the areas of the games where he was excelling. His pass completion was very, very good. His defensive statistics were excellent again. He was in the top 4% in terms of tackles he was making per 90 minutes in the French top tier that season. And he was in the top 1% for aerial duels that he was winning. So looking not just over the last sort of season or two, looking over, to be honest, the bulk of his career, he's a defender who is consistently producing really, really impressive defensive numbers at the top level of the game. And so I kind of really like this because I think it just gives someone a bit of variety. We know they needed some full-back cover because when Dennis Serkin was injured last season, they obviously had to play players out of position. I think Reinildo is going to offer really, really strong competition for places next season. And as I say, something different, someone who really revels and seems to thrive in the defensive side of the game. So there we go. That's a little bit of a summary of some of the research I've done. If this is of any interest, I've written two considerably sort of longer pieces which goes into a lot more depth than I've kind of done here. You can read both of them on the Echo website. You can get to them via my Twitter and Blue Sky pages. So yeah, if this is something that's interested you, if you're interested in that kind of statistical analysis, if a bit more from what I've seen from watching these players' clips and stuff, then go and have a read of them because I go into these kind of themes in a lot more depth. But hopefully this has given you a little bit of an overview of the players that Sunderland are bringing in and why they want to bring them in. So as ever, thanks so much for watching and I will see you soon.